Windsor Castle is the most spectacular and the most theatrical of royal properties, and it has on several occasions been used as an actual theatre. In the 19th and 20th centuries, key spaces at the castle became venues for performances of Shakespeare's plays. Surviving records of these performances include watercolours, photographs, costume and scene designs, letters from the participants, and the spaces themselves. These allow us to piece together what it was like to be in these extraordinary rooms watching Shakespeare's plays. Can we reconstruct the performances from these sources? The Shakespeare in the Royal Collection project commissioned Martin Blazeby to create 3D digital visualizations to see what could be discovered. The King's Drawing Room is a stateroom in the castle's upper ward, on the north side. It has changed little since the 19th century, when the room was colloquially called the Rubens Room, because of the paintings by Peter Paul Rubens that hung there. In the 1850s, it was the setting for Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's private theatre. During the winter season, the royal family were based at Windsor, 25 miles from London, where Queen Victoria regularly attended public theatres. To satisfy their appetite for performance while away from the capital, they invited professional actors to adapt the West End's theatrical spectacles for rooms at Windsor. Through these events, they signalled to people that they were patrons of the arts and lovers of the national poet, Shakespeare. This watercolour by Louis Arge shows a performance of Macbeth underway on a temporary wooden stage constructed in the Rubens Room.
Out, I say! Fie, my lord! Fie! A soldier and a feared!
Comparing Arge's painting with the real dimensions of the room, we can estimate the size of the stage, the distance between the performers and the audience, and the experience of different audience members. We learn that the artist has compressed the real space in some places and expanded it in others. From where Arge sat in the doorway, he had a side-on view of the stage and the Queen's dais. The Queen's viewpoint placed her almost directly opposite the stage, an ideal seat for a proscenium arch theatre with all the performance space visible. This position also meant that she couldn't see the backstage areas, where actors would have entered from the adjacent rooms, adapted as dressing rooms. But the view from the stage shows how cramped the space really was. The great Victorian actress Ellen Keane was playing a queen almost face to face with the real queen.
What need we fear who knows it, when none can call our power to account?
Perhaps because the Rubens Room offered limited space for castle staff to crowd in at the back and see the famous actors, performances moved to a bigger room in 1855.
In the late 1850s, plays were staged in St. George's Hall, a grand ceremonial room used for official state banquets. In this case, reconstructing the space was a little more difficult. Although St. George's Hall was built in the 14th century, it no longer looks like it did in Victoria's reign, because it was severely damaged by fire in 1992. This is how it looks today in its reconstructed state. 19th century photography can give us some idea of the original appearance of the ceiling and its effect on light and atmosphere. Letters from the scenic designer tell us that the wooden theatre structure created for the much smaller Rubens Room was reused in St. George's Hall. Here there was a lot more room available. While it may have been a squeeze in the Rubens Room for actors to move behind the stage and the painted canvas scenery, in St. George's Hall there was almost too much space. The size of the hall would also have a significant effect on the acoustics of the performance in comparison with the intimacy of the Rubens Room.
For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings.
The theatre occupied about a third of the room, with a screen at the back of the audience. This may have been in the middle of its length, allowing easier access for the royal family from the neighbouring rooms. However, this leaves a considerable gap behind the theatre.
Some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed, all murdered.
For Richard II, several of the actors were wearing elaborate plate armour, a decision driven by Charles Keane's obsession with historical accuracy. Crossing a space like this to access the stage, it would have been difficult not to clink and rattle. Though it had been redecorated several times, St George's Hall was a room of medieval origin, and historical plays such as Richard II seemed to spring to life. Queen Victoria wrote, "It was curious that such a play, in which all my ancestors figured, should just have been performed in St George's Hall."
The castle's history also came into play in the mid-20th century for a different kind of performance. During World War II, a film version of Henry V, starring Laurence Olivier, was screened at Windsor for the royal family. This took place in a room that was already a memorial to a different war. Originally a courtyard, the space was covered over in the early 19th century and furnished with paintings depicting the commanders, statesmen and princes involved in the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. Shakespeare's war epic Henry V would have been amplified by such a room at any time. In the wartime context of 1944, it was even more appropriate. However, during the war, the most valuable paintings in the royal collection were removed. They were stored at the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth to protect them from potential bomb damage. So the paintings of princes and military commanders were in fact missing when the film was shown. Instead, the room was decorated in anticipation of the annual Windsor Castle pantomime. In the frame for George III's portrait hung a large painting of Aladdin. The Emperor of Russia was replaced by Dick Whittington, and the Emperor of Austria by Cinderella. For George VI and his family, the effect must have been strange. The paintings that they knew well and the jarringly different pantomime pictures were both present in their imaginations in the darkened room.
Once more! Onto the breach! Dear friends, once more, or close them all up with our English dead!
Olivier's film was made as propaganda, using Shakespeare's depiction of an English victory in battle to suggest that victory in World War II was almost at hand. But the space of the Waterloo Chamber made a history of earlier battles fought across the Channel even more present.
In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger.